In most cases of interest to mass transfer operations, the two phases are only partially miscible. So they are not completely miscible to each other. And this is so that in equilibrium, there are still two phases that can be separated from each other. So actually, there will be ease in separation. And in terms of monetary consideration, there will not be a lot of spending in terms of separating the two phases after the separation has happened already. It's because of the fact that your phases are only partially miscible. So meaning you could still see phases that are readily separable. Wait, somebody wrote in the chat box. Wala nag-move ang slides.
Wala, Miss, ara lang yapon sa introduction.
Oh, why is that? We'll stop share. Can you now see the current slide?
Yes, Miss.
So let's see. I'll move to the next slide. It let me know if it's transferred already. Nag-move siya.
Yes, miss. Nag-move na siya, miss.
Okay, nanotabo siya man. Wait lang ha. Okay, let's go to the next. Okay, nag-move siya.
Yes, miss.
Sige. So we'll resume recording. Wait lang class ha. So, under appropriate conditions, repeated contact and phase separation can lead to almost complete separation of the components present in the phases. So, the physical basis for the separation processes using multi-stage equipment in the case of your separation processes later on is the difference in phase equilibrium compositions. So unit operations are pertinent to separative processes that depend only on the differences in physical properties and not on chemical behavior. So meaning, as early as now, you are already informed that when we speak of separation processes based upon mass transfer, we will not take into account chemical reactions that happen between the species present in our phases. So we are only concerned with the physical separation. Now, these processes are either based on a difference in equilibrium phase composition. The processes that is being mentioned in here has something to do with the multi-stage processes mentioned in here on the first bullet. And or a difference in the mass transfer rate of the mixture of components. So what is happening usually in multi-stage equipment or multi-stage processing is that whatever is the difference in the composition during equilibrium and whatever is the difference between the transfer rates of these particular components present in your phases, they are the governing factors whether you'll be able to have a complete separation of your component from the rest of the species that are present in a particular phase. That is when we talk about separation processes already. Moving on, we have here one of the unit processes that you will study in the separation process topic. Second sem is distillation. So this is the most widely used separation process in the chemical industry. And it is oftentimes referred to as fractionation or fractional distillation. The other terms related to it is also rectification. Now, the separation of here of your components or constituents present in your particular phase is based on the difference in their boiling points or based on the differences in the volatilities of the components present. So those that are having lower boiling points will be separated first, then compared to those that have higher boiling points. Now, in distillation, a vapor phase comes into contact with the liquid phase, and there is mass transfer from the liquid to the vapor phase. So in this case, liquid and steam generally contain the same components. And in our case, to simplify the process of finding the information required in a particular distillation problem, we limit only our phases to a two-component phase system. So there are multi-component distillation problems, but here in the undergrad, we only limit it to two-component distillation problems. Now, the liquid is at its boiling point. So when we speak of the liquid that is at its boiling point, meaning it's a saturated liquid already, and the vapor is in equilibrium at its dew point. So meaning your vapor is about to be condensed already because it's in equilibrium at its dew point. There is, in this case of distillation, simultaneous mass transfer of liquid by vaporization and of vapor by condensation. So these two things happens together. So the end effect is an increase in the concentration of the most volatile component in the steam, which is then condensed. That way, we are able to remove it as what we call as the distillate. Because if it's still vapor, it cannot be still removed from your still or your distilling column. We call it still. And the least volatile component remains in the liquid. The least volatile component, of course, has the highest boiling point in your mixture of components, and as such, it remains in the liquid phase. Those that have less boiling point are those that are in your vapor phase that is condensed and separated from the entire phase where it is initially contained. So this is a simple distillation column which illustrates what happens inside the equipment. Please let me know if you can see the video. So as based on the video that you have viewed, you have there two inlets for the feed. Now, in our case, when we will study it under separation processes, we'll only limit it to a single feed distilling column. But in terms of the auxiliary equipments that you're going to look into and do material and energy balance, it would really consist of the two equipments that was shown, the condenser and the reboiler. So we're going to talk about it later in the second semester, but just to give you an idea, so what really happens in the distilling column is mass transfer. The mass transfer of the most volatile component in the liquid phase to the vapor phase. So that's your distillation. Now, in gas absorption and stripping, there is also transfer of one component to another, or one component from one phase to another phase. In the case of gas absorption, so you can see here this gas absorption involves the transfer of a soluble component of a gas phase to a relatively non-volatile liquid absorbent. So if you simplify that particular statement is the mass transfer in gas absorption is from gas to liquid phase. So your liquid phase acts as the absorber in gas absorption. Now, in desorption, it's the opposite of that. Desorption or other terms associated with it is stripping. So in the case of desorption, the transfer of the component is from the liquid to the gas. So your solvent this time is not the liquid, but rather the gas. So your gas as a solvent is stripping off your liquid phase with a particular component of interest. So these two are related, but in terms of transfer, one is the opposite of the other. So I will not anymore expound to that, but there is mass transfer because the solvent phase, whatever it may be, it could be the liquid phase or the gas phase, is transferring a particular component from one phase to it. So it takes out that component of interest from one phase and transfer it to itself. Now that's the case of gas absorption and stripping. Oftentimes, in terms of application, it's used in purification processes like pollutants from the air is being eliminated to the use of gas absorption. The same thing, unwanted components in the liquid phase are being stripped off using a gas absorber, or shall we say a gas solvent phase. So that's in the case of absorption. Now, in the interest of time, this particular slide is shared with you anyhow in Canvas. So you can read this particular part wherein it's explaining the important application of mass transfer in the case of taking out ammonia from air through the use of a particular solution having waters. It's mentioning here an aqueous solution. So you bubble air to that particular aqueous solution, and in the process, you eliminate ammonia from it. So that's the process of gas absorption. Now, let me see. So this is a Okay, that's a simple case of gas absorption. So it illustrated perfectly the context of having to eliminate a pollutant present in a particular gas mixture sample through the use of the liquid solvent, the one that is sprayed on top of your gas absorber. So we're going to study this in detail in separation processes. The next is liquid-liquid extraction. So in the case of gas absorption and stripping, the phases that are in contact is the liquid phase and the gas phase. Now, in the case of liquid-liquid extraction, both phases that are contacted are liquid in form. So, but the main goal is here to transfer one particular component in one liquid phase to another phase. And it involves the use of the term extract and raffinate. So we are concerned with the extract because that's where the component of interest is. The raffinate is considered as the byproduct, or shall we say, if compared to mining, it simply is the tailing. So that's your liquid-liquid extraction. Now, read this part here in the slide, which talks about how the solvent diffuses to the other liquid to take out the component that it needs to separate from it. The mass transfer now occurs in that sense that the component from one liquid phase is transferred to another. Now, the video here in liquid-liquid extraction upon viewing it a while ago is quite very long. So in the interest of time, I will leave that to you to check in your Canvas later on during your self-directed learning time. Okay? Now, the last of the mass transfer that is covered in, that could be done in a multi-stage fashion because it's not limited only up to this, is leaching, or we call it the solid liquid extraction. So in this case, the component of interest is taken from the solid matrix. Now, it's in the case of leaching. So we take out or we dissolve the solvent, diffuses through the solid matrix, and take out the component of interest from the solid. So that could be done simply by the use of, shall we say, the term that could be used is heap leaching. That could be done through the use of leaching or in the process of dispersion. Now, I don't want to elaborate on that, but that's something that also involves mass transfer because you take out the mass from the solid and transfer it to the liquid solvent. Now, when you drink tea, when you drink sa bagay, if you drink instant coffee, that's not anymore leaching. But if it's really like coffee that is being brewed, then that's also a process of leaching. You take out that thing that the coffee lovers drink using the process of leaching, using the solvent water. In the case of drinking tea, so you have the tea bag, the warm water extract the tea from the tea bag, and then have it now drink as a form of beverage. So that's the transfer of a solid dissolved in the liquid solvent, and that's leaching, okay? In day-to-day observable phenomena, the simplest form of leaching. We have adsorption. So in this case, class, the thing that is to be taken out simply is present on the surface of the solid. It's not something unlike leaching that it's really on the matrix itself. It's weaved through the atoms and the molecules of the solid. This time, the component of interest is simply on the surface of the solid. So this time it could be easily absorbed on top of the solid, the component of interest, and you just simply need a particular solvent to take it out on the surface of that particular solid. Or it could be that you have a contaminant and you want it absorbed on the solid, so you're using the solid to transfer that particular contaminant on its surface. A lot of research is done as to check whether there is affinity of a particular component, let's say for example in the liquid phase, to the adsorber, the one in which going to take out, responsible of taking out that particular component in the phase where it is in. So, but the manner of taking it out is arat lang siya sa babaw sang surface ng solid. Hindi siya atugid sa sulod sang solid. So in leaching, ang aton nga process is the liquid takes out the component of interest from the solid. In the case of adsorption, most of the time, the adsorber is the one that's taking the component of interest from a liquid phase. It gets adsorbed on the surface of the adsorber because of what we call affinity. That particular component is affiliated to the adsorber. The rest of the components in your liquid phase, for example, is not, shall we say, chemically affiliated to the adsorber that's going to take out that particular component only. So that's in the case of adsorption. All of this you're going to study in separation processes anchored on mass transfer. Now, here in this slide, it talks about molecular sieves that could be used as synthetic adsorbents. But when we speak of adsorptions, there's so many adsorbers. There's so many forms of adsorbers that could be used in terms of taking a particular component from a phase and having it only adhere on the surface of that particular adsorber. Okay, so that's the end of the introduction to mass transfer. So if you notice, class, majority of the topic that will be covered in separation processes, like 95% of that is based on mass transfer principle. Now, why cover it now here in heat and mass transfer? Because our subject is still heat and mass transfer. And those processes that I have mentioned, with the exception of adsorption, is normally occurring in multi-stage fashion. So in the interest of having to save money and optimizing the process, it could be designed such that you will have a multi-stage operation. Now, here in HMT, we're going to look into mass transfer in the context of diffusion. If you notice in our syllabus, after the discussion on mass transfer, we'll be talking about diffusion and convective mass transfer. So there's a need for me to discuss mass transfer first before we go to diffusion, because in diffusion, there is still transfer of mass. So whether it's from the gas, whether it's from the liquid, or whether it's from the solid phase. So this set of slides that was shared to you is simply but an intro to mass transfer that will not be ending in this course on heat and mass transfer, but would still be extending up to separation processes later on. Okay, so we'll be sharing a new set of slides which will now be talking on the mechanism of mass transfer. This is very short, then we can go to diffusion right away. Just give me a minute. Okay, this has only like 6 slides. Okay, let me share it with you. So it says here on my end that you can see now the application. So I hope everybody can see now the application. So the mechanism of mass transfer. So there are 3 basic mechanisms of mass transfer. It could either be in the form of diffusion, and that's our topic next. It could be in the case of migration, or it could be in the case of convection. So we will not cover migration because this has something to do with the presence of an electric field. So it needs the presence of an electric field for the transfer of a component from one particular, let's say, phase to another phase. So diffusion. So diffusion is defined as the spontaneous movement of any material from where it is to where it is not. So mahalin siya kung diin siya naghalin, makadto siya kung diin wala siya digto in our language. So that's diffusion. But migration is the movement of charged particles in an electric field. So a requirement for this particular mass transfer is the presence of the electric field. I think you can still see. Wala naman siya gamove. Wait ha. Now, is it moving? Wala gyapon siya gamo. We'll stop sharing. Wait lang. Can you see the slide on the three basic mechanisms of mass transport?
Yes, Miss.
Okay. I don't know what's wrong with this uh, laptop. Anyway, so I was discussing on migration a while ago. So there's a need for the presence of an electric field because this time movement is uh, occurring on these charged particles. So movement of charged particles in an electric field. Whereas for convection, more or less, you know how convection occurs. There's movement of a fluid. So movement of material contained within a volume element of stirred solution. So wherever there's a movement of fluid, then we have convective currents that are present. So in the case of mass transfer, the movement of the material is enhanced due to the presence of a steering mechanism. So a steerer in the presence your equipment aids in the transfer of the material. Okay. Now our focus this afternoon is on diffusion. Now diffusion, what is it? So it's the random movement of molecules from a region of high concentration to a region of lower concentration. So just like heat transferring from a high temperature source to a low temperature source, the rate at which a molecule diffuses is dependent upon the difference in concentration. So that's the driving force for mass transfer between the 2 points in the solution. We call this the concentration gradient. That's the same lingo that we're using generally for mass transfer. The gradient has to be concentration difference. Now, on diffusion, and on the diffusion coefficient D. So in this case now, when we do calculations related to diffusion, we'll be encountering this constant and it's given by the problem. We call it the diffusion coefficient D. It depends on the species that is to be transferred and where it is to be transferred to. So the D sub AB, which has the characteristic value for a specific solution species at fixed temperature. So this is very important, the last part here of the slide that says at fixed temperature. So meaning in the process of diffusion, we are on the assumption that temperature is kept constant. If we change the temperature, the diffusion rate, of course, will not be the same as what it was originally. Now, what equation is the basis and the fundamental of quantifying how a particular species diffuses from its end to a point where it is not, or where it was not found, or where it is not found rather? So the movement of a chemical species under the influence of a concentration gradient in the case of diffusion is quantified by Fick's first law. Now, in this case, we can represent a particular particle I. So it could be particle A, it could be particle B. So in this case, if we write it generally, we'll represent a particle as I, and it will diffuse to a cross-sectional area as a function of the concentration gradient across the selected area. That concentration gradient that is being mentioned here is this one. This is the concentration gradient, the partial derivative of the concentration of I with respect to X. Now, the flux that is mentioned here are as particles per unit time across the given segment. So the flux is NA actually. You see it in a different formula later on. The rate of diffusion of a particular particle from one location to another, and it is expressed in terms of the unit kilomole of that particular particle per square meter per unit time. Okay? Now, according to Fick's law, this is your formula. Your D sub I here is your constant we call the diffusion coefficient, and it depends on the component that is diffusing and the medium in which it is diffusing into. So this is a constant. The problem gives you this. The reason why you see here a negative sign in the formula is because if, let's say, for example, a component I is diffusing from one point to another point, if we will account its concentration, let's say final minus initial, from the reference point of view, then we see that the concentration at the final stage will be lesser than the concentration initially because it has already diffused from that particular location to another. And to make that particular quantity positive, because if we have something bigger subtracted from a smaller quantity, the answer will be negative. That's the purpose of the negative sign that you're seeing here. We want to quantify how fast is the particular particle I diffusing to that particular, let's say, section that in which it is to transfer to. So we only want the positive value or the positive measure of that. So that is why we have this one as negative. That way, our answer here for all at all times will be positive. So I have mentioned this already. Partial derivative of concentration with respect to x is the concentration gradient. Okay, we move on to the next slide. What about migration? Though this is not really something that we're going to cover here, but nonetheless, we'll just have for the sake of give you an idea what is migration because it's still mass transfer. However, it involves the process of the transfer of charged particles. So the movement of charged particles in response to a local electric field is called migration. So there is no movement of these charged particles if in the first place there is no electric field or your sample was not exposed to an electric field. So it's a requirement for migration to occur. The contribution of migration to the total flux, that's the rate of transfer in terms of mole per square meter of area per unit time, is proportional to, in this case of migration, the charge in the ion and the ion concentration. The same thing with the diffusion coefficient. And to take note, the magnitude of the electric field gradient experienced by the ion. So there are four controlling factors for the flux or the rate of diffusion in the case of migration. So you need to know the charge of the ion concentration, the diffusion coefficient, which is a constant, and the magnitude of the electric field in which your sample is subjected to. A change in the applied potential or this particular electric field to a solid electrode in solution containing ion is of course expected to affect the charge migration. You change the magnitude of the electric field, you change the rate of the migration of the charge, as you could see in the illustration above. The higher the electric field, of course, we expect a greater amount of migration. All right, say yes, say the transfer of your charged particles from one location to another. That's in the case of migration. And since after the topic of diffusion, we're going to discuss convection in context of mass transfer. So in this case, the movement of fluids is described by hydrodynamics. Hydrodynamics meaning how it moves. So convection as it applies to electrochemistry is, shall we say, the forced movement of a solution species by the presence of a stirrer. So by mechanical steering or by other means. The rate at which a solution is stirred can generally be controlled with the convective contribution in one dimension to total flux of the species described in terms of its hydrodynamic velocity. The effect of steering in this case, bottom line, in the solution will also be something to consider in terms of the rate of convection, the rate of movement of the fluid, which will also be translated into the amount of mass of the component that is to be transfer. So in here, requirement give that there is steering or there is a form of forced, shall we say, disturbance that happens to your fluid. That way, the transfer or the mass transfer should occur. That is in the case of convection. Let's see what did I have here. So based on the video, you could see the association of gas absorption. If you look at it, gas absorption is on the macroscopic view. What really happens is on the molecule side, we're not concerned about it. In gas absorption, we're just interested of transferring ammonia as a pollutant from a particular gas mixture to the liquid solvent, which is in that case, in the discussion, is just water. So you transfer ammonia from the mixture of gases, let's say air, and transfer it to the liquid solvent. That's gas absorption, macroscopic view of the separation process. But if you look into the microscopic level, what really happens between your ammonia bubble, the one that contains the ammonia, and your liquid solvent that's going to take ammonia from the mixture of gases, that's where diffusion is. That's what it's trying to explain to you. So ammonia in your ammonia bubble needs to diffuse to its boundary region into the solvent phase, which is responsible of taking it out from the mixture with it where it is contained. So if you look at it now in HMT, we study in the microscopic level because we want to look into the diffusion process, and the separation process. We simply concern ourselves with the macroscopic material balance of what is transferred where to. We want to know how much is transferred from where to, and then we design the equipment that will do the particular objective. So HMT concerns itself of the mechanism, while SEPA is concerning itself with the design of the equipment that will accomplish such particular objective. So I hope you're able to connect diffusion now with gas absorption, because in the context of the video you just listened to, it's actually gas absorption, then diffusion is being related to how ammonia is transferred from the ammonia bubble into the liquid solvent that is responsible in taking it out from the gas mixture. Okay, so that's it for the introduction to mass transfer and the mechanism of mass transfer. Responsible is diffusion. So now we go to diffusion. So that's our main concern. If you have time and you have already seen, for those who have seen already the bulk of the lecture slide on diffusion. It's really bulky because I think it has more or less 30 slides on it, and it's divided into three sections. We have diffusion in gases, diffusion in liquid, and diffusion in solid. So we can have a 5-minute break before we go to the next slide. Okay, class, huh? Okay, here it is already. So we can have a 5-minute break before we continue with the next slide. We'll just have the recording paused so you can have your break as well. So when we speak of diffusion, we have this fixed law guide equation for the rate of diffusion. And you have here the J sub AZ as the molar flux of component A in the Z direction. And it's defined by the number of moles. Oftentimes, class, this number of moles is in kilomoles of A. And A is an arbitrary letter that is being used. But for uniformity's sake, we'll just use A. That is moving past a given region divided by the area of that region multiplied by the time interval. Now, in short, this molar flux will have a set of unit of kilomole per square meter per second. Now, the DAB, which is your constant, this represents this one, the DAB represents the, wait, class, the molar diffusivity of your molecule A in B. So if it's going to diffuse to a particular, let's say, fluid, which is A, air, or let's say liquid, then we refer to that particular component as B, where your A is going to transfer to is B. Okay, so molecule A in B. And this particular constant has the set of unit of meters squared per second. Now your Ca is the concentration of A, which is of course mole per unit volume. So you notice here now that it's specified as kilomole per cubic meter. And Z is the distance of diffusion in meters. So the set of units that is being used here in defining what would be the resulting set of unit for J is in SI. And oftentimes the problems that are given as in SI. If it is English, then just make sure that all your linear units are in feet. Your time unit, I think, should be in hours. And your area should be in square feet. That is if we're dealing with English set of units. Now, there are sufficient sample problems in Giancu, please, that translates a given set of unit from SI to English and even into the CGS system of measurement. Okay, so moving on, let me know kung naga-transition siya. We go first to gases, how gases diffuse from where it is from to where it is not found. Okay, so gas A to B, that is B is where it's not found. Wait. Sige, we go now to a particular sample problem right away. An illustration of the use of this formula, the fixed law of diffusion. I suggest that you have a piece of paper with you so you can jot down notes while we're working on the solution of this particular problem. Although in the recording, the previous recording shared in Canvas, it's already there. You can simply have it listened to right away and then copy as the solution is being discussed. So in this sample problem number 1, you are given a mixture of helium and nitrogen gas contained in a pipe at a temperature of 298 Kelvin and 1 atmosphere total pressure. Now, it's mentioned that it is constant throughout. So meaning in the process of diffusion of these two gases, the pressure in each side where they are diffusing is to be kept constant. At one end of the pipe, at point 1, the partial pressure of A, and that is helium, is zero point 0.6 atmosphere. And at the other end, with zero point 0.2 meter from point 1, you have the partial pressure of A to be zero point 0.2. So zero point 0.6 from point 1 and then zero point 0.2 to zero point 0.2. So the distance between point 1 and point 0.2 is this 20 centimeters, so equivalent to zero point 0.2 meters. Calculate the flux of helium at steady state if you're given this coefficient constant of helium to nitrogen mixture of 0.687 times 10 raised to negative 4 meters per second. Now, the values that are enclosed in the parentheses is for the CGS system of units wherein you have the linear unit in centimeter and you have the time in seconds and the mass in grams. Now, our main concern is just simply to use the equation, the Fick's law in this particular problem. So we will concentrate on the original given units, and that's in the meter unit and seconds. Now, if it's in the meter unit and seconds for the time, then your unit for pressure in atmosphere has to be converted. So before I go to that, I'll stop sharing here and we'll go to a part where I can write the solution. Okay, let me share now. So for this problem, you write the given. Why is it going down? So for the given, oh, wait, class. I let you take the picture of the problem so you can follow through while I'm discussing it. Now you may take a picture. Wait, class, huh? Can you see the, wait, class. Forgot. So you have to take a picture of the problem first so that you can follow through easily on the solution that I'm going to write. Okay, we'll stop sharing now. I hope you've taken picture already. We will share now the whiteboard. So given you are given a mixture of helium and nitrogen, and you are concerned with the transfer of helium from point 1 to point 2. Let's say this is your point 1 and this is your point 2. And the transfer will be in this direction. You will have helium here to consider. So you need to take note of the partial pressure of helium at this point and also the partial pressure of helium at this particular point. We'll have this as PA1, where A is your helium, and we'll have here as PA2, the partial pressure of helium in points 1 and point 2. So based on the problem that we have discussed, it says here that at one end of the pipe at point 1, the partial pressure of helium is 0.6 atm. So you can write here 0.6 atm. In here, this would be 0.2 atm. Then you're given that the distance that separates point 1 and 2, so I'll place it here, the z is equal to 20 centimeters, so that would be 0.2 meters. And then you are given that the diffusion coefficient, the diffusion coefficient constant for helium to nitrogen in this case is 0.687 times 10 raised to negative 4 meters squared per second. And aside from that, you're given that all of this is to happen at total pressure constant and temperature is fixed, constant as well at 298 Kelvin. And this total pressure, which is constant, is 1 atm. So I read again to you the problem so you would know. So a mixture of helium and nitrogen gas is contained in a pipe at 298 Kelvin and 1 atmosphere total pressure, which is kept constant throughout. At one end, at point 1, partial pressure of helium is 0.6, and in the other end, it's 0.2. It's 0.2 atm. With the z, the distance between point 1 and 2 equal to 20 centimeters. Now converted to meters. You have the coefficient constant for helium to nitrogen to be 0.687 times 10 raised to negative 4 meters squared per second. And you are asked here to determine the flux. So you are required to determine the flux. GAZ, where A is your helium. Okay? Now that's our given and are required. So you have any question with this? So if there's none, you may take a picture of that because we'll go to the solution of this problem. You board. Okay, so for the solution, since we're working on the kilomole meter squared second unit, then it's a need for us to convert the units, the partial pressure units for helium. So your partial pressure unit at point 1 is in ATM, the same thing at point 2. So you need to have this converted. So 0.6 ATM, have this converted to Pascal. So 101,325 Pascal. So that converts now partial pressure in Pascal unit. You do the same for partial pressure of helium at point 2, so which is 0.2 atm. And you have here 1 atm, 101,325 Pascal as well. So you cancel the ATM unit. So you will have the corresponding pressures now in Pascal. So this is 60,795 Pascal. This one is 20,265 Pascal for the partial pressures of helium in points 1 and 2. Then we can go directly to using the formula in determining the flux. So the formula in determining the flux is negative. So you have the constant, sorry, DAB. Then you have here This is the original Fick's law equation, dz, and you need to have this converted into a form that is not a differential equation. But since if you look at it, this flux is a constant. The rate is a constant because temperature is not varying. Same thing, this one is a constant as well. So mentally, if you transfer the dz on the left side and keeping the concentration here on the right side and substituting the limits final minus initial for z and c sub a respectively, then you will have this equivalent equation, which will not anymore in derivative form. So you will have dAB, and for concentration, you will have Ca1 minus Ca2. Now, I made this Ca1 minus Ca2 so that I can make this positive already. But originally, it would be final minus initial. But since I subtracted, I interchanged it, so there's no need for us to write the negative sign here. Then you will have, of course, sorry, the Z2 minus Z1. So this is our formula. However, we don't have concentrations. We're not dealing with concentrations in terms of gases. So from the ideal gas law, PV and RT, you will find, assuming that your helium, of course, it's a real gas, assuming that it will behave ideally, we can get here a formula for concentration. So V transferred here will give you a P over RT, and this N over V is concentration. So T over RT. So in terms of what we're talking about here in this problem, so let's say helium is A. So this would be concentration of A is equal to partial pressure of A over the product of R and T. So in here, we can write now DAB, we can write DAB as 0.687 times 10 raised to negative 4. And we'll have here the partial pressure over RT replacing these concentrations here, CA1 and CA2. So what you'll have is this, PA1 minus PA2. Then this constant RT will be placed here in the denominator. And we have Z2 minus Z1. So again, we'll copy the constant here. And you have, so partial pressure now, we're converted to Pascal. So we're good to substitute here 6795 minus 2265. Your R here, the R that you will use is the 8.314. Now, this is your joule per mole Kelvin. So, 8.314. But if it's converted into joule per kilomole, then instead of using 8.314, we use the 8314. So, 8,314 for the R. And for your temperature, it's given to be 298. And of course, for the Z, this Z here, the distance between points 1 and 2, you have it in meters to be 0.2. So I will just write here on top the answer to that. So the flux, the rate in kilomole per square meter per second for the transfer of helium to nitrogen in point B is 5.63 times 10 raised to negative 4 kilomole per square meter per second. So it's a simple case actually of substitution to the Fick's law equations. So the Fick's law equation allows you to determine the flux. It's just a single word that will tell you the rate of diffusion of one thing to another. In this case, diffusion of helium to nitrogen. This is your answer in the SI set of units. But if you wish to convert this in the CGS system, convert the meters here to centimeter and the kilomole to mole. Okay? But we'll just stick to this anyway. It's just substitution to the, excuse me, the Fick's law formula. You have any questions? I think there's none. So then we go back to the slide. So we're now we'll share the slide again. Right here. Sorry. Did the slide transition?
Why, Miss?
Why naman? Sige, yun na lang po ma-share. Every time mag-share po, hindi siya na-transition. So good. Okay. In the previous problem, there's only diffusion. So you have a mixture of helium and gases contained in the pipe, and you have the diffusion of these gases from one point to another in the pipe. Okay, point one to point two. So one entire thing, a mixture of helium and nitrogen, diffusing to point two in that same pipe. So they're coming from point one and then they're going to diffuse at point two. Now, distance of which is 20 centimeters. Now, this particular case in here, you have equimolar counter diffusion in gases. Meaning in this case, you have two chambers, as you can see here in the illustration, each chamber containing gas A and B. So here in chamber one, you have gas A and B having partial pressures P sub A1 and P sub B1. The sum of these partial pressures of A and B in chamber 1 is P. Now here in chamber 2, you also have A and B. Each has their own partial pressures, PA2 now and PB2 because this is chamber 2 already, and the sum is still P. So in this case, the partial pressures of A and B in each chamber should not be equal. Otherwise, there won't be any diffusion that will happen. So you notice as well that the total pressures in each chamber is constant. So P and P here represent the same thing. Now, so you have the flux of A on the right direction. So ang flux ni A is from point 1 to point 2. Ang flux ni B is from point 2 to point 1. Now, if this is the case, how will you determine the net flux that is occurring in this equimolar counter diffusion in gases A and B? So to illustrate that, actually the transition, let me know if it transitions.
Yes, Miss. Nag-transition.
Sige. So we go to the sample problem now. So this time, you will determine the flux of A from left to right and the flux of B from right to left. So you have ammonia A, gas A is diffusing through a uniform tube 0.10 meter long containing nitrogen, which is gas B. Now, the partial pressure is the total pressure this is not the partial pressure, the total pressure in each of these chambers containing A and B is 1.0132 times 10 raised to 5 Pascal, and both has a temperature of 298 Kelvin. So the diagram to be used is similar to the diagram, this one. So it's the same illustration. That's what's happening to ammonia here and nitrogen. So at point 1, the partial pressure of ammonia is given here. And at point 2, this is its partial pressure. So notice why is the diffusion from 1 to 2? It's because partial pressure in 1 is higher in 2. Now, the diffusivity constant for this system is 0.230 times 10 raised to negative 4 meters squared per second. So you are to calculate the flux of A at steady state, and that's the same thing with that of B. Okay? So actually, our flux equation would still be the same flux equation, but we're just simply going to look into the partial pressures of each of the gases in the sections 1 and 2 where they are diffusing to and from. Okay? So please take a picture. That way we can transfer to our whiteboard for the solution of this problem. Sige, we'll now stop sharing here. The given. This is 1, this is 2. You have JA here. You have JB here. The Z in this case is, what's the distance? It's 0.10 meters. And you're given that, place it here, partial pressure of A in 1 is 1.013 times 10 raised to 4. And in 2, it's 0.507 times 10 raised to 4. Both now are in units Pascal. So we'll define here A is ammonia and B is nitrogen. So what else is given? The total pressure in the system is 1.0132 times 10 raised to 5 Pascal. Now the system is at a temperature of 298 Kelvin. And that's it. So is there anything else you need to add here? Of course, the constant 0.230 times 10 raised to negative 4 meters squared per second. So here, you are after the flux of ammonia to the right and the flux of nitrogen to the left. There's no problem in terms of finding the flux of ammonia to the right because you will still be using the same equation that we used a while ago. So you have the constant and you have here the partial pressures and you have here RT and the delta Z. Delta Z meaning the C2 minus C1. So place it here so that I will have space. So you have 0.230 times 10 raised to negative 4 meters squared per second. There's no need for you to have the partial pressures converted. So 1.013 times 10 raised to 4 Pascal. Oh, we'll have it na lang sa sabwa. So you'll have minus 0.507 times 10 raised to 4. And then you have the R here. It's still 8314. We have the temperature 298. And we have the Z, which is 0.10. Okay. So this has the unit Pascal per, the unit here is joule per mole Kelvin. So this one will be taken out. Anyways, we'll not list the unit anymore. As long as the units all agree, because it's crowded here anymore, we'll have the resulting unit for the flux in kilomole per square meter per Kelvin. In that case, your GA is, you can check, this is 4.7 T times 10 raised to negative 7. So that's kilomole per meter squared per second. Okay? Now, actually, in terms of determining the flux for B, you will be using the same equation. However, you need first to determine the partial pressure of B. So at least here, partial pressure of B in 1 will be the total pressure, which is this one, 1.0132 times 10 raised to 5 minus PA1. Because the total pressure in each of the sections here, in which the gases are to diffuse to, will be kept constant at this total pressure. So PB2, the same thing. So 10132 times 10 raised to 5 minus PA2. Whatever are the values of this PB1 and PB2, you will use in determining the JB, the J sub B asterisk. So if you're done here, we can go to the next board. Or I can leave that to you. You just do the computation. Instead of substituting this one, this PA1 and PA2 here, you will substitute this PB1 and PB2. So giving you the answer to that with the same formula, your answer will be negative 4.7 times 10 raised to negative 7 kilomole per meter squared per second. The value of the flux from left to right and right to left are equal, only that they have different signs. It's because this time for the flux of B to the left, so it's to the left. Direction is not anymore from right to left, but rather it's left to right. So if you're quantifying the flux of two components, where each are, let's say, moving on or transferring on different direction, expect that the other one will have a negative sign in reference to the first one that you have solved. So ini siya from right to left, ang J sub B asterisk. J sub A asterisk is from left to right. Okay? This is in the case in which you have equimolar. So from the term equimolar, we expect that the flux quantity will be equal. Equimolar counter diffusion between two gases. The first one, the first example, is not counter diffusion. You really have a mixture transferring from one point to another. Nag-diffuse gid ang mixture of gases in the first example. What was that? I think that was helium and nitrogen. So both this helium and nitrogen, or as a whole, this helium and nitrogen mixture diffuse from point 1 of the pipe to point 2 of the same pipe. Now this one is different. So two gases diffusing in opposite directions. Any questions here? I think there's none. So I'll stop sharing here. We'll go back to the slide. We go to 3. I think it did not transfer because I don't see here. Share again.
Nag-transfer na siya.
Nag-transfer na. Hi. Beginning hapo sa online. Now, this third case is molecular diffusion of gas A to a non-diffusing B. So this time you have a specific gas diffusing to another gas that is stagnant. It's not moving. So the illustration that was used by John Kuplis is the one that I've shared here, the exact thing. Now, here in letter A, you have air containing ammonia. Here in this particular section, this is you have a tube and you have air containing ammonia. And, sorry, diffusion of A to stagnant, non-diffusing B. So you have your benzene here in the tube below. You have benzene and you are evaporating this benzene here below to the air on top of it. And air is considered as the non-diffusing gas because benzene is going to diffuse from this part of the tube to the air on top of course, of the tube, which contains your benzene. So this is a case of benzene diffusing to the non-diffusing gas B. Okay? Another example that was used is the one that I mentioned a while ago. That's in B. So you have ammonia in air. So this is your air containing ammonia. And you have simply here water. And your ammonia in air gets dissolved in this non-moving water. So ammonia in air being absorbed into water. So this absorption of ammonia actually in water is the principle behind gas absorption, which focuses on elimination of pollutants in an air sample. So ammonia as a pollutant present in air is getting absorbed on this liquid water, which acts as your solvent. So these two cases given by Gian Kuplis illustrates how a particular diffusing gas gets transferred to a non-diffusing gas. So in this case, in here, it's actually liquid water in which your A, which is ammonia, is transferred to. In here, you have liquid benzene now evaporating and transferring to the non-stagnant air, which occupies the rest of the space in your tube. Now, if you consider this point here as 1, where ammonia is to be transferred from, that's air, and this is point 2. So your Z2 minus Z1 is this distance between air and your surface of the liquid water where your ammonia gets absorbed into. In the same way here for liquid benzene in your tube, so this is point 2 for your air, and this is point 1 where your liquid benzene is to diffuse from. So if you're going to compare this particular illustration A and B, you will notice nga ang point 1 is where the diffusing component comes from. If you notice, point 1 is where the diffusing component comes from. The stagnant component is in point 2. So in letter A, this is your stagnant component, air. And here in letter B, your stagnant component is your water. So the diffusing gas is from point 1 and it's transferred to point 2, which is the non-diffusing part. Okay? Your A is the gas that is diffusing. Your B is the non-diffusing gas or liquid where your air is to diffuse or where your gas is to diffuse in. Okay, this is the third scenario wherein you have diffusion of a gas. And let's see if the slide will transfer. Now, in terms of determining the flux in this case wherein you have a non-diffusing component where a diffusing component transfers to, the flux will have a different formula. Now, we write now the flux as capital N sub A. It would still use the diffusion coefficient AB, the constant. You have here the total pressure P of your gases, and you have here the product of RT. This is still the distance between point 1 and 2, and this is the difference between the partial pressure of your diffusing component. It's partial pressure from the part where it will be diffusing from to the point where it will be diffusing to. So that is why it's PA1 minus PA2. Now you see a new thing here in the denominator, which is the P sub BM. If you notice, it's logarithmic difference of the partial pressures of B in points 1 and 2. So PBM is equal to partial pressure of B at point 2 minus partial pressure of B at point 1 over the ln of partial pressure of B at point 1 over B at point 1 point 2 rather over B at point 1. Now, it could also be like this. Pwede man partial pressure of A at 1 minus partial pressure of A at 2 divided by the ln of. So in here you could see that this one represents already the partial pressure of B at point 2 because you're subtracting the partial pressure of A at point 2 from the total pressure. So the same thing is used in the denominator. Now you have that as your logarithmic difference in the partial pressure of B. So you just simply have for each of the different conditions here, or each of the different diffusion patterns will use its own formula, but still anchored upon the fixed law of diffusion. So this time, this will be our working equation. Okay, for this case, A diffusing to a non-diffusing B. Now, we go to the sample problem here. Water in the bottom of a narrow metal tube is held at constant temperature of 293 Kelvin. The total pressure of air, which is assumed to be dry, meaning wala na siya upod ng water vapor, is 1.01325 times 10 raised to 5 Pascal, and its temperature is 293 Kelvin. Water evaporates and diffuses through the air in the tube, and the diffusion path Z2 minus Z1 is 0.1524 meters long. The diagram is similar to the one that was used in describing this particular phenomena. So calculate the rate of evaporation at steady state in pound mole per hour per feet squared. So this is a case wherein we're concerned with English units, and kilomole, so kilogram mole or kilomole per meter squared per second. We're given the diffusivity of water vapor at 293 Kelvin and 1 atm pressure is 0.250 times 10 raised to negative 4 meters per second. Assume, of course, that the system will, in the process of diffusion, will be at constant temperature. Now, we don't want to burden ourselves anymore with this English set of units. We'll just solve this problem using the SI set of units here. Okay? So we have a case of water diffusing to air which does not contain water. Okay? So please take a picture of this so that we can move on to the whiteboard and have the solution of that explained to you. So, okay, we'll stop sharing. I'll share them. So given water in the bottom of a narrow tube is held at constant temperature of 293 Kelvin. So let's say this is where your water is. The temperature of water here is at 293 Kelvin. Now, it's at the bottom of a narrow tube held at a constant temperature with a total pressure. So P here is atmospheric pressure. And the temperature is 293. Water evaporates. So we say if this is, if that's 0.1, if this is 0.1, and this is 0.2, so this is the direction. So water evaporates through the air. So this is where your air is. And you're given the diffusion path. So I'll just place it here from 1 to 2. So that's the direction. Your delta Z is equal to 0.1524 meters. Okay. The rate of evaporation is the thing that is being asked. So if we'll represent A as water, then we are after Na. The evaporation rate of water, so we'll just limit it to this set of units. You are given the diffusion coefficient 0.250 times 10 raised to negative 4. So this is in square meter per second. Assume that the system is at constant temperature. So this is T constant. Okay, that's it. So solution. So we're properly guided. You write the formula so we know what we will be looking for. So we have the constant here. And we have the P. It has to be multiplied to the partial pressures of A. In points 1 and 2, you have RT. You have, I'd like to write the Z2 minus Z1 as delta Z. And you have the logarithmic difference in the partial pressures of B. Now, this is equation 1. Now, PB1 is, of course, the P minus PA1. PB2 is equal to the P minus PA2. The question is, what is PA1? The partial pressure of water at point 1, here where it will evaporate to the air. So at the given temperature of 293 Kelvin, determine the vapor pressure of water. And this will represent your PA1. You can get this from the property table of water at a temperature of 20 degrees Celsius. Now, this PA1, if you base it on the vapor pressure, will be now placed in here. The PA1 of water is 2.341 times 10 raised to 3 Pascal. Nice. Okay, that's okay now. And then 2.341 times 10 raised to 3. Let me check. Okay, so that would be the partial pressure of A. So in here, you need to have 101,325 minus 2.341 times 10 raised to 3. And you will have your answer there. For PA2, initially, there's no water there on the air. Okay, because this PA1 and PA2 is measured at the starting point of diffusion. So PA2 is 0, so it would simply be 101,325 minus 0. So then it follows that your PB2 is still 101,325. Okay? Um, After having this, you can solve for the log mean partial pressure difference of B. What's your answer here? 101,325 minus 2.341 times 10 raised to 3. Let me check. We'll just calculate it. Is it 99,011? 99,011 here. If somebody writes writing on the chart. Your 101,325 minus 2.341 times 10 raised to 3. My answer is 99,011. Mark. I-check lang again. So, 99,011. So, if that is the case, correct man, akong answer. So, that would be your PB1 here. PB2, we start with PB2. So, 101,325. Pwede man PB1. So, liwan tama lang ng LN sa dawon. So, LN of 101,325 over 99011. Your PBM value, be, so the answer is 100, 163.545. Is that it? Wait amo gina siyang answer. Can you please check? PBM, the lug mean partial pressure difference for B. So, I started with PB2. So, dapat diri sa dalawang PB2 man po. Ang PB1 po is this. So, the answer is 101,163.
Correct, Miss.
Thank you. So, kung amo na siya, then na-substitute na lang tato sa babaw. I'll write it here. Iano ko lang, ilain ko lang ang corner. So, you can write here now the NA. So, you just substitute the constant. So, you have 0.250 times 10 raised to negative 4. Then, you have the total pressure, 101,325. And then, extend this. You have PA1. PA1, where is that? 2.341 times 10 raised to 3. And PA2 is 0 over RT. So we use the 8, V14, temperature of 293. And the delta Z, which is 0.1524. And then this, the lug mean partial pressure difference of 100,163.545. The answer should be, let's see, times 0.1524 times 8314. Wow, so erase that to negative 9. Oh, okay. Let's see. Okay, that's it. We multiply by 0.250. Exponent negative 4 times 101,325 times 2.341. The exponent 3. Hopefully we got it right. So the answer is, what's your answer, Mark?
1.6 times 10 raised to negative 7 is
Okay lang. I have written it here a while ago. 1.6. So my answer here is 1.595. So that's near enough. Times 10 raised to negative 7 kilomole per meter squared second. So yours is 1.6, Mark.
Gin-round off ko na lang sa Miss.
1.6. But
Para
anyway,
same lang.
it's the same thing as times 10 raised to negative 7.
Yes, Miss.
Sige. So this would be the flux now. The manner in which your water vapor from the water here in the tube evaporates and get diffused to the air on top of it. So this is it. Okay, so the key here is determining the partial pressure of water at the indicated temperature. Oh, no, not the partial pressure, but you use the vapor pressure of water for its partial pressure at 0.1. It's understood that initially you don't have water vapor here in the air because it's dry. Okay? If there's a scenario, I'd like to emphasize this and I'll end with this. If there's a scenario wherein the problem says that your air contains some point water on it, then your PA2 will not be 0. The problem in this case does not mention that your air initially has water present on it. So in that case, PA2 is 0. But if there's water in your air initially present, then it will not be 0. And you will have, of course, a different value for the partial pressure of B at 0.2 because this time it will not be equal to the total pressure because you have already a value for PA1. Now, if you read John Couples, he is suggesting, and actually we'll do that in the next sample problem, that if the value of the non-diffusing component, the non-diffusing gas, partial pressure is more or less the same. Like this one, it's 99 and this one is 101. Ang tanawon mo, ang diferensya sila, mga 2 malang Pascal. So if they are more or less the same, you can get the average of the two, like simply adding these two and divide it by 2. And that could be used as your logarithmic partial pressure difference for PBM. That is if they are more or less the same. Pero there's nothing wrong with really using the formula in this case because then your answer will be more accurate. In the next example that we'll be discussing, we'll be averaging the partial pressures of the other gas because they are more or less equal or the same. Okay? You have any questions here? Actually, there's here a last sample problem under gases, but that will be covered next meeting. So we'll have this recording stop.